2022. We'll start the Cokeville City Planning Commission meeting. Call it to order. And the first item, pledge allegiance by Commissioner Eve.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so we had some confusion a little bit on the, I skipped one. Disclosures and declarations of conflicts from the commission members. So we didn't have any disclosures? No conflicts?
I do on F. Let's see, where is it now?
Four.
Thank you. That's my wife and her family's property.
Okay, approval of the, is anybody else, sorry about that, no other disclosures? The approval of the agenda order, I think we can leave it the same. This is what we determined. We don't need to change anything on that unless anybody sees something else on the agenda item. Okay, review of the minutes. We're looking at two sets of minutes. The meeting minutes from April 13th, 2022 and June 8th, 2022. I found one error, and it was on the June 8th, 2022. Item number 11, it says 17 acres instead of 1,700 acres. Should say 1,700. That's all I saw. Anybody else? Any other issues with that?
I have seen the minutes, but I wasn't happy last meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes with the change that you suggested.
I second it.
Okay.
Aye.
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 Well, yeah.
Oh.
I nothing.
No. Oh, aye.
Okay, well, that brings us into the public forum section. This is where anybody that would like to address the commissioners, it's something that's not on the agenda. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Please state your name, address, and we can open the public forum now. Okay, we'll move on from the public forum to the reports. Planning chair. The last meeting for the city council, the preliminary MPDO was passed, and what else was passed for? Preliminary plat and the preliminary development, not the development agreement, but the preliminary plat and the preliminary MPDO was when they did approve through city council. So that's all I have. Does any other commissioners have anything to report? And Darren LaFever, you got anything to report?
I do, just really quickly, the city council dues staff, we have responsibility or the charge to talk about an agricultural protection zone. And I've been meeting with some of the other planning directors in Washington County on their ones for the daytime. And that's on our agenda on this meeting too tonight. As you can put in your Dropbox, I just want to discuss it briefly with you and get some ideas, thoughts. That, and everything is moving along fast. Other than that,
Okay. That'll take us into the business items. You guys want to, I think you had some questions on the CUP, so you want to get the questions answered, and then we can do either a motion for all of them, or we can break them out individually, whatever you guys feel more comfortable with.
I want to break them out
Individually? Okay.
One, two of them, right?
Well, no, there we can,
The two that I want to break out
There's 7 of them.
is one.
okay, well, let's talk about one then. So annual renewal of the home occupation conditional use permit for a solar project located on property bordering Ground Circle Ranch on the west side of I-15. Application is Jerry Eves. And before we go, is there any complaints or anything on file with any of them, and all their other business licenses are in place? Okay,
So, question for staff. I mean, in your conditional use permits, you have conditions. Has he provided all those conditions, 1 through 10? Soils reports and all that?
So this was a renewal, this was actually approved before we were here, before Ralph and I were here, so this is just a renewal.
I understand, but
So that's in your package, you have all the things that are there.
that's what it's asking, is he's met his obligations. And it also, time's expired because he hasn't done anything on the project as far as that I know, unless putting up the wind towers, but that was 3 years ago. So the book's telling me that his time's expired.
So nothing has been done on the property since the conditional use.
It's telling me that, no, he has to come in and resubmit for another conditional use permit, because yearly.
And that's your guys' all I can say is.
There's some legal thing I don't understand, but everything I read in here and going through the conditions, he hasn't done any of these things that here on your specific list. I mean, he's got a site plan that was submitted to me, but you don't have soil reports and things like that.
So you give me that actual, motion, I believe, or the proposal there, and, maybe you can have it on the planning commission when it went through, I don't know. It states that it's done with the land, and a conditional, and it's used here, like you're talking about. But that's up to you guys, if you guys want to revoke that because it's non-activity.
I could speak to last year. What happened was that there's two different conditional use permits, and they're both collecting data. And so what was deemed last year is they're still collecting data sufficient to meet the Utah Board of Energy or something in that nature. So, and they need a 3-year window or a 4-year window to do that. And so since they're collecting data, that was always known that this was going to be like at the conception of it, and when it was actually applied for, it was known it was going to be a longer period of time.
I understand that it might be known.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We can keep it going.
that's known, but that's not what's written. What's written is to deny it and make him come in and renew it. Because if this perpetual thing goes on, you're taking my time, you're taking staff's time, you're taking everybody's time, you're taking the city's time. I feel he should renew it. He hasn't done anything on his, that I know of. I know he hasn't. This is your conditions that run with the permit. Provide a detailed site plan, approved construction drawings, provide a soils investigation on the site, proof of environmental assessment. Has he done any of these?
Not that I know of.
So in my position, I feel I couldn't say, yeah, just approve it every year, approve it.
Well, actually, it actually says that it's just deemed abandoned. It doesn't mean you're going to count on it, but
Time expires, abandonment.
it says abandonment. But
I can go right through here and pick that out. It goes over that section, doesn't it? Are you in the state one or are you in ours?
I mean, ours.
Time abandonment, it's time abandonment.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems that he could not get his applications done with the state without having the authorization from the city. And then he has to provide.
City attorney
data to
could
the
probably speak to
state.
this.
So it's been an ongoing process for several years. So-
Yeah, it's been going, and we've renewed it every year with explanation from the applicant,
But he's usually been here.
and told us everything that's been happening every year.
So for somebody that's new to it, I have got no explanation for it.
Well, maybe we need to postpone this and tell him he needs to come in and explain what's going on.
Table it for a month.
We can do that.
Yep.
We can table it. So like that, or you could deny it, or you could continue to have it go on.
I believe that it says, well,
You go,
that's just how I feel.
so you can approve the conditions or deny, it, or you can table it. You have one choice.
You table it, you spend more of everybody's time and more of the city's time by tabling it. if you come to court, do what you got, do your things that condition with that permit, then I would say yes. But I don't know what he's done, so I'm referring to staff and asking if he's done those 9 things on his conditional use permit.
We don't know. We don't have history. There's nothing new this year. Show us anything improved on further.
Somewhere I thought I read it requires an annual report on that, but I guess the choice is you guys. That was my position on that. All I could read and study and find out.
I would say we should, if everybody feels comfortable, we can table it and get more answers instead of maybe costing him a lot of money.
I would agree.
You're making the motion? You can.
I don't need.
I'll make a motion. I make a motion that we table business item F1, the annual review of a home conditional use permit for solar project located on property bordering Grand Circle Ranch till next month, with the understanding that he comes and explains what's going on.
1 second. Why are you calling it a home conditional use permit when it clearly says Tocqueville City conditional use permit? I mean, we need to stick to the ordinances and follow through consistently and equally on everything.
I was just reading what was on here.
Yeah, it's not a home conditional use permit. It's a conditional use permit.
It's conditional use, it's probably just typed wrong.
Okay.
It was a typo on the, there was a mistake on the agenda.
Okay.
When I'm looking through all the data, I have to go off what we are told to do and what I read, and what I read is what I got. And that's my interpretation. But you want to table it?
Do you want me to restate it?
No, I just want to get that in before you finish your thing. Before it goes too far.
I'm going to second that. I agree with you 100%. Well, apparently not 100% because I'm seconding it. But I think next month, if he's not, if there's not significant improvement, then we just,
Explanation.
and maybe we don't even put it on the agenda if he can't come in and explain. If he's not going to be willing to explain it, then we don't even put it on the agenda.
Can I make a suggestion? That our state legislature has been trying to move away and eliminate municipalities' ability to do temporary conditional use permits. The Land Use Management Act has now been amended to say that conditional use permits are perpetual in nature. Now, this one might have been before they made the amendment to the act. But the idea being, it used to be very common for municipalities to do like conditional use permits with 1 year renewal each year. And it was the equivalent of having a conditional use permit revoked almost. And if you think about it from that perspective, conditional use permits, by the way the legislature rewrote the law, essentially is a vested right. I think that there is some due process rights that Mr. Hughes would have. He's entitled to know this opportunity to be present. I don't know whether we notified Jerry and he knows that this is coming up and he stands to not have it renewed, which would then put him under the new statute, which then likely I would be advising the planning commission and council to temporary one. It has to be, should be perpetual in nature. Now, so I think we should table it. I think we should consider making sure that he's notified and that he knows that he needs to be present and show what he's doing to satisfy the ongoing conditions of the permit, and so that it can be reviewed.
I can agree, but I'm reading the current state statute right now, and it's a 12-month conditional use permit is for 12 months annually to be reviewed.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
That law hasn't changed. It might change in the future, but it has not changed as of today.
Conditional use permit? Yeah.
Now, it says we can grant an extension, but only one extension for 6 months. But he's only allowed one extension.
I think You probably ought to look at our code, because our code says we can continue.
I'm happy to sit up there.
You're speaking for the city in this nature, so.
We'll welcome you because we need some interpretation here.
I'm happy. Well, we already had one attorney up on the stand, so I figured we didn't need more, but. Well,
I would suggest that you table it, but not just expect him to come in. We've got to have some answers from staff and attorney and Jerry to make this decision on this conditional use permit. Because we got another one that's going to come right after this one. So then we got to get it right.
And the other thing is, we actually looked into, Washington City has a software program that they use for this, that we're looking at getting, where, so I had a conditional use permit in the city of Washington, and you apply online, you do that in your documents. It's very similar to our building permit process, and so then it makes the review of it very simple. They either uploaded it or they didn't, and then you have it all electronically. So we're moving in that. So by next month, when you see these, they should all be electronic.
And
We're trying to simplify it.
I can tell you last year he came and he brought reports of what was happening and where he was at in the queue with the power company and all these things, so.
But we still have to go through the criteria in here every 12 months to make sure he meets that. And I'm hung up on the time expired agreement. So you can make that motion and if we can get some more information.
Okay, we have a
Okay.
motion and a second.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so number 2 is a nightly rental for Shadow Creek Lane application, Gordon Dawson. There's no complaints on that either. You want to go separately, so you want to do a motion on that?
I'll make a motion.
Do we need to do them separately? I
Yeah.
mean, all of these?
Well, we could do 2 and 3.
2 and 3, yeah.
4,
4, 5.
2, 3, 4, and 5 can go together. Unless.
Yeah.
6.
You okay with that, Wayne?
No complaints on any of those? Approve 2 through 5.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion and a second, we'll take a vote.
Aye.
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 Okay, number 6. Annual renewal of a conditional use permit for extraction permit located on parcel T 3-0-27-132. Applicant is Washington County Water Conservancy District.
On that one, we give them a contact them to come tonight.
Is there bond in place? Is it perpetual or is it yearly?
I don't know.
It's a requirement. They have to have that security bond in place with Tocqueville City through a surety company.
This is for the, when they build the actual dam, I believe.
I don't know where it's just, when it said extraction, I went through extraction and what your criteria for your extraction permit is. And it's fairly extensive. So have they done any of that extensive stuff or they just applied for the permit and got it?
They applied for the permit. I wasn't here when they did it. I don't even see that, so.
Yeah, they've been drilling. Last time they came through, they were drilling all the potholes and get the soil reports and analysis of how they're going to construct the dam. And so I know last time there was a small report on that one too.
So when the extraction permit requires, before this expires, which is now, have they sent in yearly reports on what they've extracted? All right, then I'm back to square one again. It does not, I can't approve that because they haven't met anything in the requirements. And do we have a bond from them? You have to have a bond from anything extraction.
Yeah.
It's calling for that, and if they don't have it, then
I think they probably had that in the original application. I'd have to find that application.
I don't know what they do, because it's quasi-government. So I don't know what they do.
Because government doesn't
I'm
charge
just
us.
looking it up right now. Government doesn't charge government, so I actually don't think that they do. I'm gonna look it up right now.
it doesn't say in here, if you're a government, that you don't have to provide a bond. So I'm just asking these questions because I want to make it fair for everybody.
8, Do they need to?
I would deny it flat right out with,
I don't think-
Does a quasi-government
I
need
don't
to?
think the water
bond?
conservancy requires a bond for extraction, right?
They do?
chances are
We
we
can
don't have
require, we
one.
can require compliance with our ordinance.
But did we require them when they came in?
That'd be a question when they
I
got
don't
the permit, whether a bond is
I would,
required.
and I don't know, I haven't seen that one yet.
Wayne is right, under the extraction overlay zone permit, it does usually require at least a restoration bond. If they get halfway and stop, what happens, how you
It
restore
also
it?
requires annual reports from them, so you know what they're doing.
Well, I do know where they're at as far as construction on the pipeline. As far as the gravel extraction, no. I know that they're actively going forward, there's been in meetings with Aspen and I about the recreation area.
Is that extraction report for the dam? Where is the extraction taking place? What piece of property?
I believe, look on that, I didn't say, but I was thinking the only place that they're gonna do it is where they own that property that they were going to extract for, and that's up on top of the west of, Claremont Trader Gold property,
It's up on that hill.
up on the top where, Chief Token was buried.
So, for me, I would make a motion to deny it because they haven't met their requirements and they have to meet that. And Tocqueville needs to have that met for their security.
Let's do this, Wayne, I don't disagree with your thinking, but let's give the Conservancy District notice, give them the opportunity to come in and present and show us what they're doing and why they're in compliance before we non-renew them. Because a non-renewal is the equivalent of revocation. So let's give them at least the opportunity. Let's not, because if staff is saying that we don't know whether they were,
We're just new enough to where we don't, I don't know where that application will be, we don't.
You're pushing me in a corner because nowhere in here it tells me to table it.
Well, there's
At the point of,
okay,
the point of this
Wayne,
meeting,
but your city attorney's telling you so that we don't avoid a fight with the.
I understand.
With
I just- I
the,
want-
with
I
the
want
Conservancy
clarification.
District, who we have to have a lot of dealings with. I would rather, and if the fight is that we revoked a vested right without giving due process of law and giving them notice and opportunity to be heard and explain why, I'd much rather be on the other side of that one and not expend taxpayer money for this municipality to be in a lawsuit with the Conservancy District, which we have contracts and agreements back and forth in all different ways. I think we ought to be a better steward and simply
I understand.
notify them and tell them it's time to come in and show us, and then we'll then make a decision. I think that's probably,
Yeah, that's what the email was. So.
I understand that, but Tocqueville can't keep going on with all these conditional use permits in the same
So-
situation.
So probably what we need to do as staff there then, is we need to,
follow up on
meet
that.
with every one of these people and say, hey, you're coming for renewal, you better be here.
Do we have a process for that or
Do your
not
due
yet?
diligence or something.
Just haven't got there.
Well, also
I mean, I agree with you 100%.
these are listed,
I'm driving this point across.
no, I get it.
these are
That's
listed
what I always like about Wayne.
2 months in advance so that we actually have time to do this.
So
This
when
isn't-
that
this
packet
doesn't
comes to
expire
me,
in
we
2
have that
months.
information from the staff that says, yes, they have this, that, this, and that, and this. And it's a simple process.
When is the permit, when's the expiration on the permit?
It's 2 months.
2 months.
It's the end of next month, so we do have another meeting. We'll do that on purpose.
Before we tell them 2 months in advance, with non-renew, let's give them notice.
So I would look for a motion on this for,
I make a motion that we table business item F6 for a renewable conditional use permit for the Water Conservancy District. We move it till next month and give them a chance to come and appear before us and
I would second
show
that.
what we're doing, show what they're doing.
okay, we have a motion in a second?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, annual renewal of the conditional use permit for Windsong project located on property boarding ground circle ranch on the west side of I-15, application Jerry Eves.
Another conditional use permit?
Probably same thing with that one.
They're both the
Yeah,
same.
we
1
need
and
to-
7 are the same.
Yes.
Yeah, they are identical.
different parcel numbers.
Different parcel numbers, yes.
Windsong was wind power,
One is solar, one is wind. Yeah.
Yeah, there were two different applications.
Same criteria, that your demands on them, your conditions are different on them. I believe they're different on that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We had actually adopted an ordinance very similar to the county's wind generation ordinance that, so we had a kind of a set of standards by which to regulate them under, because you can imagine with these massive windmills and turbines and the light flicker and things like that that can occur from them, and we wanted to be able to, so yes, the conditional use permit for the Windsong project, which is the wind power project, has some additional conditions, and most of those are compliance with our wind generation ordinance that we adopted.
for clarification, on that, like you were saying earlier, basically, once somebody gets a conditional use on their property, doesn't that come with the city, that property?
And we going forward, yeah, on someone like Jerry's, I know that predated it, and so that would be, but I still think that that is the mindset moving forward for the legislature and state law, and I think we ought to be looking at that as, hey, before we just go and let someone go along on 7 or 8 years worth of 1-year conditional use permits, that we don't just yank it willy-nilly. And I don't mean, Wayne, I'm not saying that, it's give them good notice, give them an opportunity to present reasons why it should be renewed. And then, and only then, if it's not, I think we should recommend and go forward with non-renewal.
But if I was to come in and apply, just for this discussion,
Right now,
if I was to come in and apply right now,
I would advise that we can no longer do
1 year.
as a condition that it has to be renewed annually.
Yeah, so that's what's actually, that's why we're reviewing it, because the actual conditional use for the item always says we have a 1 year anniversary renewal.
It was an easy way to sell certain things, especially to neighbors and the public, to say, hey, look, we'll look at this and we'll revisit it every year. Frankly, I like, Wayne, I mean, I like that ability to have a look at it, especially in a smaller municipality. It is more of an administrative project.
So if you move it to perpetual, they don't have to do it every year, and they still don't meet these demands.
But if they don't, okay, so you're exactly right, but what the statute says, if they are not complying with the conditions of the conditional use permit, then and only then the governing body can notice up a hearing and conduct a hearing to revoke the conditional use permit. It still doesn't obviate them from complying.
Well, can't we get with the guy and say, listen, provide us with your soil thing, provide us with your environmental assessment, and move on?
Yes.
But you haven't got any of this from anybody, ever. So
I would say they
just trying to figure out how to make it work. Are we gonna get away from
Yeah.
conditional use? or
Wayne,
call
I'm
it something
guessing at the
else?
time they applied, they provided some of that stuff. I don't know.
I would say they get all, just, in compliance, they'll get conditional use. But where that application is, I don't know, and where that information is, I
You know, so we need to do a better job of assuming that, getting that
don't know.
information.
You know, we're on the digital, we've got, we're able to keep that for us, so there's some sort of paper or a filing cabinet that goes to the check and next to the.
For guys like me where it's black and white, I need to see it. And then make my job so much easier, unless this is not what we're here for. So it's just,
The district might have their original application and all the slips that they have. That new staff.
We need to make a motion on this one.
we're gonna table it and
I make a motion that we table business item F7, the annual renewal of conditional use permit for the Windsong project, till next meeting, and ask them to come and show us what they're doing.
And I'll also second that components match.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Aye.
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 Okay, business item number 8, discussion on preliminary plan application submitted by Wasatch commercial builders. What I'd like to do is we'll go through the file here. We have an acknowledgement of water supply signed of the preliminary plat phasing plan, the preliminary plat itself. We have the soils report, the deed, the drainage report, preliminary plat application, the staff comments, title report, warranty deed, and the will serve letter from Ash Creek. The staff comments will read as number one, the submittal requirements for the preliminary plat are complete as the Tocqueville City Code 10-19-C-3. The application is submitted is a complete application. The JUC members have all stated the adequate services are available for the project. The JUC members will have further comments when the project's construction drawings are submitted for review. The preliminary plat is in line with the current zoning of R115. Staff feels that the development agreement would be pertinent to allowing this project to move forward as per the Tocqueville City Code 10-19C-5. The developer is proposing to build this project in 3 phases as per the preliminary plat. The documents are in all the folders. If you have any questions, ask there. Nobody did. I would like to ask, before we do the public hearing, if I pull up the right amendment. So it looks like the road or the secondary road has been moved, and it looks like it's kind of going through the cemetery now. Can you guys?
That's just like a drop here.
Oh, so the whole thing should just shift down to that, down to that side?
Oh, which would make it not going through that other lot as well.
It would go through that lot, it was now a lot. It won't go through the cemetery.
Darren, did all the road widths and all that, you're comfortable with them and the water lines and everything like that?
Road widths are, third party matters, all the lots, size. Everything's there. The applicant did submit a phasing plan for you guys to know.
I have a question on that phasing plan too, so, and one that had been brought up, so the phase 1 is red there. Are you guys planning on continuing that road around for access to the cemetery while you're working on phase 2? Because how are we gonna still serve that cemetery?
Yeah, so
Yeah, go ahead.
probably loud enough.
The very back of it,
The very back.
just hold that button down for 3 seconds.
Phase 1 is to provide cemetery access, but it's not clear where that access is.
So we've had discussions that initially through phase 1, we could leave the existing road in place. That would be with the tree lined streets, the fencing separating the residential, it could all stay in place. If it's preferable, then we can extend phase 1 road into the cemetery, provide that parking, and then have access through that development. That's, I think, a less option because through construction, you're going to have people trying to access the cemetery while construction's happening. So I think it's a better option to let them continue down the road that's existing, get that phase complete, and when moving into phase 2, we'll give access through phase 1 while phase 2 is under construction.
So what about your owners of 42, 43, 44, and 45? They're not gonna want that road in their backyard if they're ready to build or prior to you doing phase 2.
Well, in phase 2, then we would abandon that road and move traffic on to phase 1.
42.
But there's gonna be a lull between phase 1 and phase 2, and they're gonna be stuck, them homeowners are gonna be stuck with that temporary road.
They can't build they can't build on phase 2 until they have their secondary access. They can only have 20 in phase 1. So they can't exceed more than 20 lots of the phase 1.
I think if we can leave that road, that's a good idea, because that's where everybody just kind of parks.
Yeah.
The cemetery fills up and they park all the way along that road.
Right.
So if
And
we let
generally
that
speaking,
road-
we would plan to move through this phasing, one following the other. There's no intentions of stopping construction unless market drives it.
That the market is gonna drive it.
Yeah, and that's the reasons for wanting to put that on there, to not disturb phases 2 and 3 until it's necessary, so we're not creating a dust or a nuisance that doesn't need to be there if we're not gonna use it.
Well, I think if they can leave that oil road there and not put that temporary dirt, and then it does go through one of your lots at 57, but yeah.
So the temporary access will not happen until phase two.
But we'll have that, what he's saying, we'll have that access we have now, and then that will keep them out of their phase one fly.
I know.
So who owns that road right now, that cemetery road? Whose property is it?
Jokerville does.
So we have, per all the suggestions, Attorney Snow in our zone change, we started working on a development agreement that will abandon that road and we rededicate the roads within the development to the city. So that development agreement is in process. It's handling items that are pertain to each phase. So items needed for phase one to be a final plat would have to meet that development agreement. Items that are needed beyond 20 lots would be in that development agreement, as well as secondary access, tree line streets, parking, anything that needs to be deeded back to the city. So development agreement would handle all of those items.
What does Tokerville get for that road?
A bigger road.
Well,
A better
so
road.
that- so-
I would say better road,
And parking on both ends and access to.
because we don't really have parking on the street after that, you know? They're not gonna want us parking all the way down.
Well, the-
On these
they're gonna
houses.
do- aren't there gonna be some dedicated parking?
There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 spots.
Plus the ones on the south, plus the secondary access.
You know, if you're real popular and you die, they're gonna wanna have more parking.
Well, and
Wayne, there are gonna be people wanting to go to your
A
grave.
guy like me, you won't have to worry about it. I mean,
you don't even need parking spots.
So.
I think realistically,
Property that we own.
Well, it'll all, it will come out in the development agreement definitely, because the city's not gonna improve those parking stalls. The developer will need to. So there's property there that they'll be giving, but we need to the city. The city is going to have to abandon that existing roadway there by ordinance. We have to do an ordinance to do that. As we talked about the secondary access, that could be an asset in a couple different ways, because it could help us to, in our active transportation, give our people a place to walk, circulation, people can go along, push their strollers around. The access on the south side, like you said, if you're real popular when you die,
Yeah.
that they would give you the opportunity for people to park in that cemetery, have another access out, to open a gate. We didn't require them to put a gate like we have on the north side. There's different things, but it's all going to be in that development agreement if you guys do this.
So were we kind of off base here? I mean, we got off the subject here of, can we discuss what we're discussing later on? Because we're in a,
We're not at the public hearing.
not in public hearing, so
We're here to discuss it before the public hearing, so maybe we can get a bunch of the questions answered.
what's the name of these roads?
that one's Olson Drive, the main road.
Olson Drive.
No, I didn't hear that. So do they have names?
They do not currently, but it's open for discussion.
If you don't have names, you don't meet your criteria for your preliminary plat.
Well, I can name
That's
them
one
now.
of your big things, is the streets must be named, and just trying to really be thorough and not treat
I
anybody.
can appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Private preliminary, I'll read it to you.
That's-
Oh, okay, well,
that's Road Main and Loop Road. Olson Parkway? Yeah.
There's a lot of things that you don't have in here, so are we,
There's a lot. Are we talking,
There's quite a few.
As I look at that,
It said existing streets. There are no existing streets. These are future streets.
you gotta go over here, it's there. You know,
because we have a grid system that we do. the-
preliminary plat,
Yeah,
and this is what it's asking for, it's asking for
the-
preliminary plat.
yeah.
And this is what it's asking for. It's asking for size of the water lines, size of park strips, landscaping, waterways, Where's your fire hydrants? Just asking for all these things.
They're on, the fire hydrants,
Preliminary.
they're all on there, I can see
I
it.
see some water lines, but I don't see the sizing and things like that, so I'm asking,
I guess we could-
are we too much in here, asking too much for a preliminary, or are we,
I think
we're asking what we're asking for?
Yeah.
Do we need to be changing the criteria for the preliminary?
Because you can still
I don't know.
approve it, you can still recommend it conditional upon that they name your roads. I mean, or you can defer it to the final plat.
Well, he has
Well,
names.
the fire department said they don't want names, they want numbers, so. Got a number.
We don't want to give them numbers.
Yeah.
My question is, and this is, it's great to have Keith here for this because when I went up and I looked at from the cemetery down, I thought that most of the secondary access was in that cut. But I think like the first, from the top down, I think maybe about 50% of it is not in the cut. It's in the natural terrain. So my,
Sheet 2 shows the grading of it.
yeah, my recommendation or my thing was I would think that it would have to go through the hillside review and at least go through the hillside development standards.
So we've looked at that,
So,
and then
Definitely has.
the history of that hillside is that it was removed during the build of Tokerville Boulevard. It's been weeds, Toker Boulevard, yeah. Weeds and everything else have re-landscaped the hill, but it's not a native slope. That slope's been previously disturbed clear to the cemetery
It's been
From the
re-
south, on the south end?
on the south.
It's been revegetated and reclaimed. So
But
to
there's
me,
no-
that, it's
There's
still
no
a hill.
limitation on hillside. Once it's disturbed,
Well,
it's
actually,
disturbed.
the ordinance says anything over 10 degrees, right, doesn't distort, right, whether if it's.
But once it's previously disturbed, then it's moved for hillside.
So one thing we.
I haven't read that anywhere.
Yeah, he is correct. Under our hillside ordinance, if it's been previously disturbed, we can't do it. Ask a new owner to come in. But what we can do is we do have compliance requirements for slopes over a certain degree.
That would be-
Yeah.
My main thing is build that.
But he doesn't have to go through the hillside permit process.
To the review.
And our intentions
Just
are
build it to the.
When cutting that roadway in there, to re-beautify anything that's disturbed in the process with retaining above and below with vegetation.
Is it going to be a road or is it a trail?
It's a road for emergency egress, used as a trail in the meantime.
See, and
The statue of Wayne.
That's why it's only 20 feet wide.
Correct.
Okay, that was my question too.
Yep.
And I think we need to visit that ordinance because a secondary access to me should be they drive in one side, they can drive out, or they can drive in either side. To me, that is a
Well,
secondary access.
the secondary access requirement is a creature of fire code, and it's the fire access road table appendix in the International Fire Code. And so really, it's one of those things that we probably have to be working with the fire district and what's acceptable to them. And
So on that note, we actually meet the fire code without the secondary access because we're providing a sprinkler system in the home. So the secondary access is only falling back to Tokerville's requirement to
More
have
than
that.
20 lots per one access.
We want to have a secondary access because we're trapped everywhere else.
And the secondary is for emergency sake only. That's the way it's written. So it would be used in an egress situation only.
That answers my questions. Your questions?
Is our secondary access and our requirements only for temporary?
Temporary.
Or is it
it
secondary?
has to be an all-weather
It has
surface.
to be permanent, all weather surface.
Asphalt for daily use.
It will be an asphalt all-weather surface, but it's not open to travel daily.
And I think
There's multiple developments in town that are the exact same way. They're actually dirt roads.
So it's going to be closed at certain times?
It'll be closed. It'll be closed to through
All-
traffic all the time.
Those ballards at the end so that a vehicle can't come down through it, but it can be pedestrian, traffic, railway, stuff like that.
Don't we want secondary access for vehicles?
In an
It will-
emergency.
It will suffice vehicles, fire trucks.
Emergency access.
Only emergencies. So Tocqueville requires only second access, emergency only.
So really, if we were, because this 20, I don't know where the 20 lots came from. It's not in compliance with fire code. Most municipalities allow more than that without a second access. It's just there, it's 20. So it really, if you go to the fire code, it goes to 30 without an access.
But then the fire
And we're
code
over-
requires
we're well over
26
30.
wide if we're going, so them going 20, I mean, we're staying away from fire code. He's trying to comply with our city ordinance, which is the requirement of a secondary emergency access.
I think the fire code is actually lower level code than the city code.
Yes, I would agree with that.
But the city code is what it is.
So if we have an emergency, who do we get to keep or to get it open?
Run it over.
Yeah, they're just not there.
There's these cheeky little ones.
Yeah, there,
They
call them crash
Not-
gates.
Yeah, okay, cool, I like that. I have all the faith in your world, you'll make that road look nice.
And should they, and name it properly too, right?
Yes.
That one's Wayne's.
Wayne's World. Wayne's.
Of Wayne's
I
World.
want you to know I bought 4 plots there a couple, 3 years ago, and they're looking off now. I was looking at the sunset, but now I'm looking at houses, so. I'm not very happy about it.
When you're residing there, you'll be looking at dirt.
I have a one question for you on the storm drain. I noticed you don't have any silting basins.
So they're working through the actual storage of it.
You want to use flow separations, or what do you want to do?
You'll get a stand on for us to use. It's just the drainage report is in your packet.
I seen that, I read that.
They're talking about the barracudas in, and then they're also.
I know, but Barracuda is, I'm getting at it. Barracuda is a nice system, but it requires maintenance. Is it become Tocqueville's constant maintenance problem?
When people put in infrastructure, when developers put in infrastructure, just like the fire lights.
Well, unless they put in detention basin, and we don't have that maintenance, except for weeds, but.
Well, and we're so close to the proximity, if you look at what the Department of Water Quality is looking for at this point, we're looking to remove the oils, these types of things.
Well, the Barracuda will do that.
And it will do that.
That's a good system. I just,
Quality of water is what you're not looking at downstream neighbors and not flooding them out. So that's kind of different. That's where the extension ponds come and the storage, but they are going to be doing storage as for their drainage report. A lot of that storage will be in pipes. Inside the subdivision.
you work there.
They do different bathing. They are going to be required to put that temporary detention pond to hold that until it's silt out the.
I read all that.
When they talk about oils and things like that.
I was impressed with that report.
Yeah. What happens with that is they're not there.
I did.
So my question, you're showing the secondary access going through the cemetery. You're saying it's not going to go through the cemetery. So it's going to go through lot 28. Does that give enough frontage road taking that out?
Um,
28.
That's a big one.
Yeah, it just depends where you put it.
Okay.
One thing we-
Man, I think you could put that right down the side of that 28 and get it out of that, showing it right there in the cemetery now.
That all of you guys are making would be good talking points in the development agreement. Which
I would require a development agreement with this.
I'm just looking at that. It's probably about where my brother-in-law is going to be buried, so I don't, maybe it's okay.
be under the rope.
Where's Anita at?
Oh, my heck, I'm going to catch heck on that one.
Okay, does anybody have any more questions on that?
No, but I appreciate that input, Darren, and doing your homework.
Aaron's
These
good.
guys have done a really exceptional job as far as going through that.
I see it. I went through all your stuff today, everything they gave me. I'm impressed. I'm impressed you're going Barracuda too.
Well,
It's awesome.
and Wayne is correct. The preliminary plat is supposed to have names and width of the road.
It shows the widths.
It does show the width.
Yeah,
I checked that.
Look, you have it on a note or anything like that, or
It looks like there's one that says cul-de-sac. We could-
There's one that says 50-foot public, but I didn't like the name of that.
if
Oh.
it could be approved with the conditions you have.
yeah, I mean, again,
Again,
this is a recommendation. It needs to, by the time it comes to council, maybe just throw in an updated version of that with the street names on it. That'd be great.
And I'm not really saying this is somewhere for or against, but I would say that a condition of the motion would be to require construction drawings, I don't know for that. And so,
Maybe location, not so
Yeah.
much sizing.
I'm surprised the fire didn't catch the
I
hydrants.
think
The
that.
hydrants are on there.
That's a
There was
hydrant.
something-
That's a hydrant.
That's not a hydrant. Look at your hydrant. That's a water meter. So they didn't catch the fire hydrants either, which I'm surprised they didn't catch that, because fire hydrants is a big deal for the fire.
And a lot of things, what I do.
Probably
look at
that's what I
is
thought.
The application, the code, I've been looking at the code, and there's a lot of things. Our code is so contradictory from one side to the other, because I bet you I could go through the code and find something that goes all against what we're trying to do for our class. Somewhere.
I just want to be fair and even with every person that comes in here.
Completely, yes.
These are creatures of Bill Rano and his thoroughness, the prior city attorney back almost 15 years ago, his thoroughness in some of these ordinances. To me, the level of detail in a preliminary plat that he requires is probably as significant as I've seen by any municipality. It's stuff that's normally dealt with after preliminary plat in the construction
So
drawings.
procedurally, for the last, for trail estates and things like that, we have an application, an actual application that has a checklist in it. I am not positive, because I went through the application to look at and review them out,
Mhm.
to see if the checklist was, and by policy, that application was somewhat intertwined with the code. And so if it's been left off that checklist on the application, is it as necessary as the code is asking? This policy is.
We have a
kind
new-
of gone by that.
You have a new statute that just got passed. It'll be effective January 1st, 2023. That will say that if the city has a land use application and the applicant has complied and filled out the application to its full extent, it's deemed complete, even if we don't have it. So we're going to have to be pretty thorough in going back and looking and comparing our ordinance to what our applications say, because if push came to shove and said, we're not going to put you on the agenda because your application is not complete. Because here in the statute, here in our code, it says you need to supply this, but the application form doesn't say you have to supply it.
Yeah.
The new state law is going to say they can be on the agenda.
This is where I've been finding a lot of the conflict between our application and the code. So,
We've been trying to touch this.
we have.
I got one more thing I'd like to clear up on this.
Okay, let's do it.
I'm glad Josh is speaking right now. So you're butting up against agricultural. And I'm a super proponent of agricultural. Any man or people that want to farm and ranch gives you and I food. And those lots next to that, I mean, this has been agricultural for forever. If we're talking about, so we've got 1, 2, 3 lots that, those people are gonna move in there and they're gonna love it. They're gonna see cows and horses and they think that's really great. But eventually they're gonna complain. And typically, cities,
That's why we're gonna do the agricultural zone. because
I
some of them
understand,
are-
but that agricultural zone's got holes poked all through it.
Yeah,
I wanna
The
get
one that
Josh's.
the one that Darren's gonna propose
Yeah,
tonight.
it's good, but it's got too many state regulations that regulate that farmer to death. So all I'm saying is some might think it's good and some might hate it and they're gonna come complain to the city about that. I mean, cows do make noise, there is smell, water can be controlled. Naturally, the water flow from one agriculture to the next, you're kind of cutting that off a little bit, but there's just, what can we do or what can we impose to clean that up so we don't have that problem? So we don't have 4 landowners constantly coming back here and complaining about the noise and they want the agriculture to go away, and that agriculture is never going to go away as long as I'm alive.
It's a great question. I mean, both landowners have equal rights.
They do have equal rights, but take this, Josh, listen to me, agriculture supersedes any right a new person moving in has.
So agriculture there currently has been forever. Homeowner 1, 2, 3 shows up and see that. They know that it's there, they have no room for ground.
They do,
There's
Josh,
a home.
but they eventually complain because it's not nice. After a while, they get tired of it. And history through Hurricane, St. George, all those are kicked out. Council seemed to side with the landowner because he's built a house, invested there, but in my heart of hearts, I want to protect that agriculture of this town because that's what Tokerville is about, is some agriculture, not all homes.
Are you doing a cinder block wall there or no? Or are you doing any wall?
So the fencings that I did, and the problem is at this time is currently Ash Creek sewer line is running right down the property. So we were putting, looking things for, wall, something to separate the spaces. We're going to this other.
They're gonna want some separation, there's no doubt about that.
So each lot belongs to a separate owner. So, typically we have to get those lots prior to building that particular space. So if we need to do some kind of barrier to be done at the home building itself. Generally people will fence off their lots, but I mean, if it's,
But they might, but they might not, Josh.
And you buy lot number one, and that's the one out the door because you want the agricultural, so.
it may be interesting having their backyard open to that.
They might be, but then I go down there and shoot me a cow right in the middle of that field to butcher it, they're gonna scream bloody murder.
Yeah, but they're gonna scream anyway.
You can't fire,
You know.
you can't discharge fire on
They are gonna scream and complain,
So I'm
and what are we gonna do about
So
it?
Wayne, is there a question that you have for the applicant?
Yeah, because that's way
I
off
do.
topic from the evaluation.
What can we do to buffer that? That's my question.
So,
I know.
so hold on, what is that? We can't even ask that question because that's not in our ordinance. As a.
I don't know that we can require or even ask that.
We're not requiring it, I'm just asking. I'm simply asking to make harmony between agricultural.
I don't think that's gonna be Josh, that's gonna be the new landowner. That's not gonna be him, he's the developer.
Well, he is the developer,
He's
but
not gonna buy that lot, he's gonna sell that lot, and then that person is gonna be the one you're gonna ask that question to.
I mean, I think the answer is that we ought to listen to what Darren is talking about and see if
Yeah.
if there is an agricultural protection type of zone ordinance that we want to adopt for when you have residential right up against agricultural. And it may be some sort of limitation on distancing. It could require barriers like solid walls and things like that. I don't even know if we know exactly what that would be, but I don't know if that we could, because it's not in fruition right now. I don't think that we probably can impose that upon this applicant. We may be able to impose it at a building permit stage on individual homes adjacent to it if we get it passed and stuff like that. But right now, I am not aware that we have any sort of provision in our ordinances that we can point to and say, this is where we're going to require you to put in a solid block wall. Yeah.
I understand the
I'm just asking out of courtesy.
Yeah, no, it's a valid question. I mean,
I understand the spirit of the question. We don't want to be in this either direction. But this time, I think, kind of building permit statement is done as that owner decides to release.
So how do we put a mechanism in before homeowners?
So there is on the final plat, we could make them put a little note on there, so that when they close on those lots, they will see that final plat, those lots will be stated, and that's part of what this overlay zone, the agricultural protection overlay zone, that the applicants, or the existing agricultural people will have to come in and apply for that. And there's a lot of things other than what you're talking about, as far as cattle, butchering of cows, different things like that, that go into this ordinance. There's other things such as municipalities getting with dam for utilities, different things like that.
Well, whatever you gotta do, I wanna get away from losing that agricultural anywhere in this town.
It does, if we get in here in the one that I've got.
I think we should move this discussion to the discussion item. We'll move this to the discussion item because it is in the discussion item. What we need to do now is if anybody has any more questions for the applicant, no one has any more questions for the applicant?
Wayne?
Okay,
Thank you.
thank
Well, I know
you
this
for
actor.
your
He's a
time.
very upright,
Yeah.
outstanding person.
So at this time, I'd like to open up the public hearing for the preliminary plan application submitted by Wasatch Commercial Builders Tax ID 1 for T-166-B-1-A-1-A current zoning is R115, single family residential. If anybody has any comments for the public comment portion, please address us at the mic, state your name and address.
And then my name is also about that street drive. I own that agricultural property, north side. I don't know if the planning commission can't require that a permanent block wall be placed on that property line. I would think the builders just to maintain, I'll tell you what's gonna happen, those homes are gonna be sold to families. They're gonna have kids. The kids are gonna climb up with the fence. And I've got a couple of animals that they start playing with them. They'll burn down. And I'm just trying to avoid any issue. And I think to solve the water problem, the spraying problem, it's not gonna do anything for the smell, but it would eliminate any potential accident if the builder would put up a 10-foot block wall on that property. And I would hope they would consider that.
Thank you. Any other comments for the public hearing?
Dan Catlin, 821 South Page Street. Just a question for the builder, if someone as popular as Wilson is parking. Is there any way that during the first phase they could actually put some little salt on the south side?
The south side's actually, the reason we're kind of trying to stay away from that as long as possible is not to scare us away.
Okay.
Because we're just gonna, once you take the grass off, you're gonna look at that.
Yeah, I was just looking at it, because you are going to lose the parking down the street eventually, so once that comes in. And just a comment on the lots that are next to the agriculture. If the people don't do their due diligence moving in next to agriculture, then that's on them, in my opinion. They don't like the cows, they should move. Sorry, Dan,
that was
Coordinated work.
Good job, Dan.
I'll second that.
DC on 495 South Western Road. I'm right across from the cemetery, or from this future program. And I actually have residency permit for parking in the cemetery later on in life, after that. I'll be right next to you.
Really?
I hope so.
I hope so too.
I have two comments. The first comment is, that's a beautiful line of trees along that road. We're gonna lose them. I'd like to see a concerted effort by the developer to see what we can do to mitigate that loss in their final landscaping ideas and what they commit the city to do. Because that's part of what makes Hillsborough beautiful, is that line of trees. The second thing is, when I first saw this proposal and the secondary access came up, I suggested then, and I suggest again, make the secondary access, if at all possible, the primary access to the cemetery. That means that people going to the cemetery will not have to drive through a residential property. It will cost more money, it will make that road not just a limited access road, you'll have to make it a standard city side road. It will take a little bit of work on that cut to do that. But we have a nationally recognized cemetery, nationally recognized. There are people buried there, and people come from all over the country to see their graves. We know that. And it's a beautiful place. And let's make it even more beautiful. Let's make it more accessible to what it's there for. There to honor the dead. The idea of having to drive through a residential subdivision to get to that cemetery bothers me. Not something you don't they do. So I would appeal to the city, the council, to encourage the possible use of that secondary access as a primary access. You know the slope of that road?
The difficulty in that is we've got only allowed on the access on the road a certain distance between accesses. And so if you're going to have access to it, you will drop the ability to have something.
Okay. There might be ways to get around that with state. There usually are.
All right, got your 3-minute timer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments for the public hearing? Okay, we look for a motion to close the public hearing.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
I second it.
Motion and a second.
Aye.
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 Okay, do we have any further discussion between the commissioners? And if not, I'd look to make a motion for the preliminary plat.
I actually like DC's recommendation. I think that's a great recommendation about making that the main road, although, sounds like there's problems with that, but that is a good thought.
So, you want to vote on this preliminary plat right now?
Motion and a recommendation.
I think you need to have your developer agreement in place with this. How does?
It's not a requirement.
It's not a requirement.
No, you can make a motion subject to the development agreement being.
It's not a requirement.
Final,
Can't you make
but
that
not at this time.
a condition of your?
Normally we do,
You can do a condition.
What is the staff? Didn't the staff recommend that?
It's for final.
I did.
yeah, usually at final.
It's usually done at final. So if there's not one in place by final, then you would say it needs to be completed at that time. You would always put that, but it needs a development agreement. They will be doing the development agreement, so when it comes for the next one, then we'll see if it was completed or not.
Because the staff feels that it's pertinent. As now? So, you want that development agreement now or later?
Final time.
It is.
That's pretty much standard, isn't it, to get a developer agreement? We do not need it at this point?
Not at this point, no.
I mean, I like everything about it. There's some valid points out there. I mean,
I agree.
there's some
think
super
we-
valid points on
Good
that.
points on it.
People
Yeah.
don't do, because it's not like you're just, I mean, you're driving to a more densely populated area to get to your cemetery versus other cemeteries. And there was some
Need some triggers.
There was some points on that.
Anybody ready to make a motion?
He's in a hurry.
I'm not
That's why I
sure
want
what we
public
make a
comment.
motion.
It would be to recommend approval with the names or denial with names of roads.
Yeah, I will make a motion.
You'll make the motion?
Yeah.
I can't give you a recommendation, it's your guys' recommendation.
Are we I'm asking, are we in order, in place?
What's that?
Is everything in place to approve this?
I feel it is.
Staff deemed that
Yeah.
the applicant has met the requirements of the code, is what it says.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we recommend approval of item F8 with the condition of roads being named. Is that correct, Wayne?
Roads?
Roads being named, isn't that required?
That's a requirement.
Yeah.
That's a
So with
requirement.
that condition. And also,
Fire hydrants.
okay, the fire hydrants.
I think you need to have everything in order.
My other, it would be that obviously the drawing doesn't show that that road is going over my brother-in-law's future brother-in-law.
So we need to go into.
I've already got
Size it,
text
like,
messages from my
environmental
wife,
location,
so.
like it's calling out. What is calling out in your ordinance is what you need to follow.
Yeah, have you looked at the staff review and staff recommendation?
I was looking at the application policy is different than the ordinance on naming. If we were talking about naming, and we're talking about the size of the water line, we generally show the water line, we show things in the utilities, we're showing things.
That's when we work out construction drawings.
As current, standard practices of a preliminary plat, and that. But
I'd agree with that.
I would do it with that.
if I go by ordinance.
I'll go with that, but I can't, then this book serves me no purpose. Because it's
Okay, that's my motion. so.
technically giving me some grounds, but then we're overstating it. It appears we're overstating their preliminary plat requirements.
Okay, we have a motion
I
that,
second it.
we have a motion and a second to approve the preliminary plat contingent upon naming the roads, right?
Aye.
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 Because follow my heart.
Number 9, discussion on final Firelight Development Agreement. This,
Conflict council has to get off in 15 minutes, so we would have number 9. And then go straight to 10 and 11.
do we need to make a motion to do that?
I don't know, 3 or 2.
So we're going to number 10 first?
Yeah, make a motion.
If you're the chair of the meeting, you can make that if you want to ask your board.
Okay, so we can just move forward by moving number 9 to the end of the agenda? Okay. So we'll move on to number 10. We'll come back to 9. Discussion on final approval of the Firelight MPDO plan and ordinance amending the city's official zoning map to designate Firelight subject property as having MPDO zoning submitted by Sun River Firelight. I want to let Bruce talk about this, with some of the findings we've had. And so, Bruce, can you hear everybody, or are you?
I can, and maybe I didn't track. Are you going to deal with the public hearing portion on the development agreement later after this?
We're going to come back to the development agreement after.
Okay. So it's my understanding that on the agenda, again, there's a couple of things with respect to Firelight. There's a final plat to be reviewed by the Planning Commission, a final application for MPDO zone and public hearing on the development agreement, portions of the development agreement dealing with zoning matters. And that's right, Joey, right? Those are the 3 things with respect to Firelight on the agenda for tonight.
Yes, and we'll skip the development agreement for now.
Okay,
So what we want to talk about is the MPDO
right.
and the final MPDO submission and the final plat submission.
Okay, so in doing that, just so to maybe set the stage for that, it's ordinance 10-15C-10 that governs the process with respect to final MPDO approval, of which that final MPDO approval has a component of it as a final plat review and approval. And so that 10-15C-10 is divided into 4 subsections. One is a determination of consistency. That's something that the Planning Commission does. It's sort of a first step. Part B, there's then a Planning Commission public hearing for recommendation on those things. And then Part C, the City Council would then make a review of the Planning Commission recommendations and then hold a public hearing on the MPDO zone. That is presently scheduled for the following week. Last, there would be an ordinance that would confirm the adoption of the MPDO zone. But where we're at today is the Part A, is determination of consistency. So I'm going to read those requirements of the determination of consistency, and then see where we're at with that, and which will help the planning commission perhaps determine how to proceed. So again, part A, at the time of request for a final approval, the planning commission shall determine whether the proposal is consistent with the conditions and requirements set forth by the city. The determination will include, but not limited to, the following. So, and there's 4 things in this list: a completed and approved development agreement, 1; 2, a completed and approved civil improvement and construction plans bearing the signatures of all required utilities, the city engineer, planning and zoning administrator. 3, final plat/final site plan drawing for the initial phase of the development. And 4, other conditions imposed by the planning commission or city council. So at this stage, as I see it, the planning commission or staff, the application for final MPDO approval, and confirming that these 4 things are there and completed. And if they are, it can then move forward, and the city council can move forward. If these things aren't there, then we may not be able to address the issue. So Darren is the zoning administrator. Let me just ask you, as the staff, to look at these things. Has Firelight provided you a completed and approved development agreement? Darren?
No.
Okay.
It's not complete 100% complete yet.
There's drafts been exchanged, there's progress been made, but not a completed and approved development agreement. Is that the case?
Bruce, you might want to answer that one because the ball is in the city's court. For a week, the city has had a final iteration of the development agreement based on my understanding of our last 4 or 5 work meetings that we've had on the development agreement. So we're waiting on you and the city.
Let me address that one. It is true that he has provided another iteration. Another iteration does not mean that it's been reviewed nor approved, and that approval really can't come until and it's awkward, and he sort of addressed this earlier, that the prior city attorney who drafted this stage was detail oriented. But really, you can't get to an approved development agreement unless city council has done something. In fact, we're still having a public hearing later in this meeting on aspects of the development agreement, which is, again, evidence that it's not final, it's not completed, it's not approved. We're still having hearings on that. Also, even though I've had the development agreement latest iteration for a week, it's taken time, and counsel for Firelight has maybe wished to get earlier iterations out sooner than than they did. But to think that if I'm looked at as being the holdup, I'll just say, sorry, I don't accept that, and that's unfair to try to place that upon me or the city to say that it's the city's problem. There's not a final approved development agreement. There just isn't one right now.
But Bruce,
And there's a public hearing to be had in this meeting on that agreement, which further evidences that it is not completed or approved yet. So let me move to the second one. Darren, is there a completed and approved civil improvement construction set of plans with all the required signatures submitted by Firelight to the city yet?
Not as of yet. We are working on it, but it is in the process. They are not completed yet. No.
Okay. Because again, the way I'm looking at it, when I look at this ordinance, and I'm only trying to, and this is the heading is pretty explanatory. This is a determination of consistency, meaning the planning commission has got to determine whether the requirements have been met and are consistent with what's being produced. The third one, Darren, is the final plat, says final site plan drawing for the initial phase of development. As I understand it, there was an application for final plat provided to the city a couple of weeks ago. That's correct, right, Darren? There was an application provided?
There is an application.
Was that application complete?
It was, it's not. There's a few things missing off of the checklist.
And what things would have been missing off of that checklist based upon your review?
First one was just on item 3 was the final CCNRs. The next one was the title report. The other one was this, which is minimal. It was emailing and AutoCAD format. Then on pages 3 or 4, there again, coming back to that, it's not in detail like the order or the code. The asking for construction drawings, the other one, city engineer signed up on the plat. Infrastructure, so those are, and that's what I was thinking with the application. That was the application process. I asked Keith about that earlier today. I haven't had any response of it yet. It's just time constraints haven't allowed us to go through that. So that's, yeah, those are things that we see just for the application.
Is there a policy that you're aware of that how these sorts of applications are treated if they're not complete? What does the city typically do when such a request is made and some of the information is lacking? Do you know what that policy might be?
I guess we would contact the applicant and tell them that their application is not complete.
And is there a time frame by which the complete application is supposed to be submitted in advance of this meeting tonight?
There is in that application process, it says here, it says it's submitted to the planning department no later than 12 noon, Wednesday, 2 weeks prior to the planning commission meeting. And it says what needs to be a paper copy, that type of stuff. So 12 noon, 2 weeks prior to this meeting.
Okay. So I go back to, and this is not with any, I think everyone appreciates this. I hope they do. If they don't, I don't know how they could feel differently, but all I'm trying to do is apply the ordinance that the town is aware of, the developer is aware of, and trying to work through, frankly, for probably the first time any kind of a project like this. And so each side is learning as they go, but this says that the planning commission must make a determination of whether the following are in place. And I just, despite the best efforts from the developer to get these in place as quickly as possible and within the last couple of weeks, all I can say to the planning commission is it doesn't appear that these things are in place. And so the planning commission needs to make a decision on whether they table, whether they move forward, whether they, what they do with that, what I'll call lack of complete information.
Thank you. You guys want to?
I'm going to make a very specific request. That is going to be the planning commission's action, that this staff provide the applicant with very specific list of deficiencies. I want a list. I want it written as to the construction drawings, what's deficient, And I want a list as to what as to the final plat, what is deficient. And I also want from the city's conflict council, no more reviewing my drafts and making comments. If you don't like the language or want something changed, it's now your turn to provide the developer with your language on what you want for a final version now. Because I've attempted to give a final version a couple different times now. And so to say it's not on the city's, the ball isn't in the city's court, I think is not accurate. So
Heath, I'll take exception to that. That is just not accurate. It is not, because there has been drafts and they've been listed as drafts, only provided to us, not as final. I gave my comments timely on that draft. It's not for the city to draft the developer's agreement. It's for the developer to draft the agreement.
Well, after a third iteration, I no longer have to guess what wording you want. I need you to tell me the wording that you want, because I can't read your mind.
Not sure this is.
Your development agreement is very close. I don't have a long list of comments left. We've worked through a number of things.
I would just ask that if there's any further changes, that you make the changes.
It is not completed and it's not approved, and it won't be approved, frankly, until the city council votes to approve it. Then the planning commission can say, there's a completed and approved development.
All I'm saying is that in order for there to be a tabling based on non-compliance, then the applicant is entitled to receive notice of what they are deficient of.
But I can't give that
And
notice.
Bruce, that draft was a final draft. And so if it's
Final
deficient,
draft. It is as you said, it's a draft, Heath, and I don't want to argue with you, but it is a final draft. And until I have had input from the city council, which I haven't, I cannot tell you what else might need to be done with that development agreement.
This was my question for, like, because I
sat in the meeting where we clearly plotted out
well, no, I mean on the final, because
6,
we never got
13, and
to,
the 20th.
I wasn't in that meeting, but my question for when I looked at the final approval and the one you didn't understand was, do we have a completed and approved development agreement, and do we have completed approved civil improvement construction plans bearing the signatures that were required? Because me as a planning commissioner, I just say, where are they? Is this approved? Where's the signatures? That's my only question. And if it doesn't meet that criteria, then what do I do? Or what do we do as not me, but what do we do as a commission? So that was my main question for the whole thing. That the portion on the final plat, which we're not really to on the agenda, but that's where I refer to Darren, because I didn't go through the application to find what was missing.
So I am committed to do my best in given my abilities to review this stuff. Not that I need to let anybody know, but so that people are aware of what I deal with in trying to get to this work. My wife goes in for neck surgery on Tuesday next week. I'll be home the rest of that week taking care of her. So I just don't have the ability, and frankly, people are going to have to accept that fact. I don't have the ability right now to turn this document around in a week like I might have had at some other point in my life. I just don't, and I won't, and I just can't. So it's not because but I have made a number of adjustments to my schedule previously to hold multiple meetings with the developer and their council and their staff to work through this process. And we've made a significant process on getting through this MPDO ordinance process. And so it's not like, at least from my view, that there's anything that's trying to hold up the developer. In fact, just the opposite. It's just that the developer is running fast, and I can appreciate that. but maybe a little faster than they're able, because these things, this is what the ordinance says to be provided, and I'm asking those questions, where are they, to the person that made that review, and they're not there, so. About that, because I'm not in control of that.
Billy?
That's my review of the ordinance, the legal review, and then the planning commission now has to take that legal review and consider how it wants to move on these issues.
Okay, so is there any further discussion on the planning commission side about the final MPDO and the requirements for the final MPDO?
Well, pretty obvious that we are insufficient data. We're not complete. Tabling it does no good. Just kick it out and they just redo it and send it back in.
I mean, you have to table,
No,
deny,
table.
or recommend approval. Recommend approval, recommend denial, or table.
So do we treat this the same as we did the last people that didn't have everything or didn't show? And we table it and say, get your stuff together and bring it back, and then we can look at it.
What's the difference between table and reject? It's the same thing.
Then they have to start over.
No.
Well, they shouldn't have to start over because then they have it all, but they're dismissing a few things.
That's why you table.
That's why you table it.
Okay.
Table it gives them time to get what they need.
Is
You wouldn't do that.
Is that correct? Do both
Yeah.
lawyers agree on that?
Well, technically, if you were to recommend denial based on sufficiency, then it would go to the council. And if in the interim, the deficiencies were satisfied, then they could make a new finding, notwithstanding the planning commission's finding. So there's that possibility, but a tabling, you can do a table.
I'd rather table it, have
I
it
would
come
too.
through again, so staff can
Complete.
give us everything we need, so we can make a determination properly. We have to have the information, it has to meet the criteria right here, and if it doesn't meet it, let's just table it.
Is that a motion?
That is a motion.
I'll second that one.
Do we need to do anything with the public hearing? Do we need to defer that to it, or should we just repost it?
No, you should have the public hearing.
Let's have the
You should still
public
have the
hearing.
public hearing,
Okay,
because it wasn't there's input.
okay,
Otherwise, we have to have another public hearing.
Yeah. because we
Okay.
need to have-
well, let's go
Or
ahead and.
do we table it and then have the public hearing at the
We'll
same
go ahead and
time?
open the public
Well, you
hearing
have the
first.
public hearing first, and then you make the motion.
We still have to have another public hearing.
Let's go ahead.
No.
Only if it changes,
I-
it's only one.
Only if there's
And if
substantial
it's-
change.
Go ahead, Bruce. Go ahead, Bruce.
After, my thought was, I understand it's noticed up for public hearing, and I know people may be here to comment, but frankly, if it's tabled and there's not been a discussion by the planning commission, there won't be. I don't know that there's any utility to a public hearing on it. Grateful for the people that are there that may have shown up, but if the item is tabled, I don't see the utility of a public hearing on it now, and then when it's taken up again, having a second public hearing.
Because there wouldn't be a second public hearing, that requirement would already be met, only if there's substantial changes. So we'd be able to take the input from the people who are here to speak about it.
Okay.
Last time we had is.
This is
defer the
not,
public
want to
hearing
proceed with the
to-
public hearing, I'm not going
Well,
to.
just told everybody.
So, Bruce, the way that I've normally recommended to the council and the planning commission, let's go ahead and conduct the public hearing and then defer its closure until next meeting, so you can reopen the public hearing at next meeting too. We can take, anyone who's present can make comment tonight, and anyone who's present at the next meeting can make comment too.
I like that. You're
And it's just
giving every
public
opportunity.
input is maximized in that
Right,
situation.
I have no objection to that, so.
Okay, well then we'll go ahead and open the public hearing for the discussion on the final approval of the Firelight MPDO. Is there anyone that would like to address this?
It's me again. You want the mic or not? Dan Catlin, 821 South Beach Street. Made the same comments that I made before about the MPDO and the purpose of it that benefits both the developer and the city in making the zone changes and the adjustments within the MPDO easier. I don't think it should make exemptions for existing code, whether that be our setbacks, which I'm adequately against. I don't like the idea of two homes 10 feet apart. So on all the setbacks, I think that should stay in place, in my opinion. When it gets down to their density bonuses, and it's calling out, for example, Park 1 will have desert landscape, park with trees and walking paths, but it's not meeting the minimum LOS. Therefore, it should not be a credit for density. On the trails, they're asking for an additional 10% on top of their 10% because they have done additional trails. That's not set out to be able to do that in MPDO for density bonuses. And there was one more on the pickleball courts and other courts in parks asking for the active recreation. If the pickleball court is in the park, I think we have a discussion that you don't get to take two bonuses for the same parking lot. So if the pickleball is inside the park, you can take either the active recreation or the park, and you don't get to claim density for both. I think that's it on the MPDO. So when we get the development agreement, we'll see what we get.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll take a motion to close.
I'll make a motion to close public hearing.
I'll second it.
Yeah, it would not be closed, but.
Oh, yeah, we're not gonna
Oh,
close
To
it.
be
That's right.
continued.
Oh, to be continued. Thank you.
Yeah, good catch.
Thank you. Good, very good catch.
Okay. Motion and a second.
Aye.
Okay, now look for a recommendation on
Seems like we're gonna table it.
Yeah.
We're gonna table it with what? We just table it.
Table of the, I think, on behalf of the applicant, I would request that the motion table be with instructions to staff that they provide a list of deficiencies and that the city's conflict council provide properly, final language to the final draft that's been provided to them on the development agreement. So that, I don't know how else we can.
That's on behalf of the developer, right?
Well, you're tabling it because these things, it is the staff or and when I say staff, I'm referring to conflict council too. It is their opinion that they're deficient, okay? And so you say, I don't think we're at the point where we have an approved, agreed upon development agreement and it's signed. Okay, well, then the only thing the developer's waiting on is feedback, final feedback from conflict council, blessed by input from the city council, because that's really who is entitled to enter into contracts on behalf of the city, not the planning commission. And so at this point in time, we've put together and have revised it a couple of times what is agreeable to us and what we think works and what we think the city wants too. If the city wants something differently, they need to tell us in their language what they want, because we can't guess.
I think we should just do the MPDO, because the only thing we're really talking about on the MPDO and this motion is the two.
The motion
number one and
tables
number
because
two.
it's not the application.
Number 1 and 2 of the
15C.
15C-10 1 and 2, A1 and 2. That's the only two things that we don't see provided.
Yeah, provide.
For this one. Then we'll go to the final and we'll talk about the final for everything. So if that motion would be to table because of the deficiencies in 10-15C-10 A1 and 2.
Yes.
Yeah.
So is that your motion, Wayne? I mean, I can make.
Well, You twisted it for me, I can't keep track here. Because I've heard from our city attorney, which also represents them, with a different opinion from conflict counsel. And then you just come up with something where we're not about the final.
We're only talking about the
This is
final.
item
MPDO.
10, we're gonna.
We're only talking about the final MPDO, and it's that's the code that we're following right now. So there's been a lot of, there's been a lot of discussion on the other item, which we'll come back to on the next agenda.
With the city coming up with the information that we're lacking.
That's what I would, you can use that verbiage. We could table it for 10-15C-10 missing A1 through 2, 1 and 2. That's the only thing that the applicant is missing in this form.
So move it.
I'll second that one.
Okay,
Are we clear?
motion and a second, we'll vote.
Aye.
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 Okay, number 11, discussion on the final plat application submitted by Sun River Firelight. So back to the same thing. We can go with Darren's application from, where is it? From what number to what number is what's deficient in the application.
There are a few things tonight. So it's a good word, that's not our code, or that's produced. But I believe there's on the actual checklist, there, it asks for a title report, which the applicant said he had. The CCNRs.
The CCNR is part of the development agreement, isn't there a subsection in there? We saw a draft of the CCNR at one time.
Yeah.
Where are they? So
I think they probably was there somewhere.
Well, you know, and part of this is the point where you want this before final plat approval. And these are the things that get reviewed after final plat approval, before the plat gets recorded. Because some of the things in this, I have a draft, and I've given a draft, and it is both a draft of a master association set of CCNRs and a sub-association set of CCNRs, just for the active adult community of Firelight. And all I'm saying is, it's fairly detailed, but there's gonna need to be some modifications to those CCNRs based on what the final zoning ends up being. And until we have that, it's pretty hard for me to say, this is the version that we're ready, and here it's signed and it's ready to be recorded, along with the plat, because you record the plat, then you record the CCNRs immediately right afterwards. So some of these things, it's like, you can ask Mr. Jenkins, has it been provided to the city's conflict council? And that's the body that reviews CCNRs for the city. Just like staff and the utility providers review construction plans. Planning commission doesn't review those, the city council doesn't review those. The city's engineer, Darren does, and all the utility providers review the construction plans and sign off on them. So to say they're not complete.
it's not, we don't know if they're complete or not. This is my question. This has been my question.
My question to
No,
those
we take our application and we go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and we don't have some of them, and then we go to the code and we don't have some of them. So if you put your city attorney hat on, and this is a different developer, we don't meet the requirement. So then.
But I would also look at that application and say, I didn't draft that. Why are we making that something that they have to do to get final plat approval?
That's not a question for you.
That probably proceed. That shouldn't be in the application.
Can I speak to that?
You bet.
Can I speak to that? He is correct with how things generally go with respect to a final plat approval process. The challenge with Tokerville is that to get a final zone approval, the applicant for final MPDO zone approval must, separate from whatever is the customary practice in getting subdivision plat approval, to get final MPDO zone approval, must have a final plat, a final approval. And we talked about this in the meeting at your office. That means that it gets all the signatures. It's then held on the shelf in escrow, if you will, so that we don't have to hold things up to get your final zone approval for the recording of the plat, because you won't be recording the plat until all the improvements are in, which it is months and months from now.
You don't record the
But to get
CCNRs
the-
until after the plat's recorded. So why do final,
I get
why does
that,
a final
but-
signed set of CCNRs have to be submitted now before?
I don't
we
know that there
approve?
has to be, it doesn't necessarily have to be a final signed set of CCNRs, but the plat has to be something that the city has signed off on, saying all those conditions have been met, and I can say that as the CCNRs that I have them, I've reviewed them, and that they will, you know, but there's a lot of things with the final plat that aren't related to the CCNR that aren't accomplished yet. And so I don't want to get hung up on the CCNR issue. There's not all the final construction drawings. There's the things that are needed for a final plat that aren't there, that have to be there sooner than the typical subdivision process if you want the zone approval before.
I can tell you, we have in our folder for, you know, so we have 1019C-4, right, the final plat approval. Then we take the conceptual MPDO, because there's variances on that and all that. We have that document. Then we have the design standards in the subdivision, right? But in our folder, that's what I want to make sure that everybody knows, is that we have a final plat map and a final plat application. And I think the application was sent to you. Nothing has been checked off. Nothing has been gone through. It wasn't received. We just have the name at the top of it and it says C attached vicinity map. So we have that as the application, the first verbiage. And I just wanted everybody to know what I'm seeing, you know, and we have the final plat submission in my life. That's all I have. So all the other requirements at 1019C-4, which there's really not that many, but there's a few more in there that are supposed to be in there that I just don't see down here. So I don't know where it got missed, if it was not submitted, or if the city may have it and it may not upload.
So I didn't run the birds and nothing else.
That's it.
Yeah, so on that application, I took a place on nothing for the engineer to check each list, each point, checklist. They didn't do anything at all other than the stuff in the file. And then I was not able to review that for the first of this week. I thought that everything was complete before that, that's why I didn't review it for that. And last week being a holiday for the shorter week, I'm not saying that's an excuse or anything like that for me. I did not get the time to get in there to take a look at it. You know, there's a lot of these things in the applications throughout our, that are in conflict with the code, different things that need to change. Yeah. I'm not saying that's perfect, but I'm just saying, when I got the opportunity to see this, it was, and we started talking about it, and you were saying, well, I can get you that, I can get you that. So tomorrow, we'll be on that list, so I can make sure I'm getting everything. The biggest concern that I have with the final plat requirement is the construction drawing we signed off within a week. That really doesn't go. We've got 3 weeks minimum with the utility committee members and all of that, and the city engineer. And those final approvals for the DO will happen unless there's an approved development agreement with that. The most important thing, responses from council so that we can get a final document.
And we'll be discussing the development agreement next also here at for our stuff that we need to.
And the city council will also be discussing the development agreement. And until that process with the city council is complete on their review of the development agreement, there's no way for me to provide final comments on the development agreement.
Okay, so we should do the same thing with the final plat, is we should hold the public hearing, hold it again next time. And do we have any more discussion between commissioners, conflict council, anybody? Okay, so at this time I'll open up the public hearing for the final plat application, the application submitted by Sun River Firelight. Dan, do you got anything on this one? No, that was a joke. I thought you were gonna say.
Dan Galvin, 821 South Beach Street. Just a question on the phase 1 and 2. It shows right on the edge of that there is a park on that. And they are going with very small lots on that. Is going to be a requirement that to get their density going, that park goes in at the same time, is that phase is being.
Any other public comment for the public hearing? Okay, with permission to close the public hearing.
Closing it, or are we deferring it, suspending it? I'll make a motion that we suspend the public hearing. Portion.
Motion is second.
Aye.
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 Okay, so now if we're ready, we can make a motion for the final plat, number 11.
We are tabling.
Okay, that's the motion.
Wayne's work was just.
This is what we're doing. You guys don't understand that?
It's very simple for a planning commissioner. By following this, we are tabling this.
I'll second
We
that
are again,
tabling.
right? We are again, or you are?
I'm gonna make the motion that I'm with the table.
All right. I'll second that motion.
We're on 10.
11. F11. Okay, we have a motion and a second.
It's exhausted.
We have a motion and a second. We'll vote.
Aye.
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 Okay, that takes us back to number 9, discussion on the Firelight Development Agreement. Fortunately, I had a lot of time to look at this development agreement, and I actually had a lot of input in some of the stuff that I said, but the only question I have is, and I think Scott's going to be expecting this, is the discovery in the villas, a small number of residential units used for the marketing and development buyer interest, not to exceed 10 in number. And that's the nightly rentals in the marketing rentals. Okay.
They're models that people can say.
If the nightly rental or the nightly rental ordinance, or what is it called? Yeah, if that one is deemed that it controls that wouldn't allow for 10, it would only allow for 5. That's my only thing. I don't know which one supersedes what. So that was my only comment to get back on that.
Well, I think before we get into this, I want to maybe preface so that the public can understand, and so the planning commission. If you look at 1015C1, which is the purpose and the intent of the MPDO zone, it says a master plan development overlay zone is intended to provide an alternative to conventional zoning and land development approaches to encourage the most creative and innovative development of land. This overlay zone may allow the standards of this article, they're talking about the MPDO article, to be applied to all areas of the city. It is the intent of this article to ensure that the character of the underlying zones and surrounding districts is maintained in harmony with the city's general plan and satisfy the requirements of applicable design guidelines and design standards and specifications. Then you get to section 2, which is the interpretation. It says, insofar as the application of the regulations and concepts contained herein conflict with the strict construction requirements and provisions of this article and or other provisions of this title, which is Title 10, which is our land use ordinances, this article shall control. For example, the application of clustering in the regulations provided under this article shall, for example, the application of clustering in the setback and building separation provisions in this article may conflict with the setback and building separation provisions of the underlying zone as specified in this title. However, uses including both permitted and conditional uses specified for each zoning district in this title shall not be modified by the application of the regulations in this article. So what it says is that you can modify, under this type of concept or setting, you can modify the city's regular standards and specifications for certain zones. We're operating all of this property is in the R120 zone. So it's got very strict frontage requirements, setback, front and rear setback and side setback. It's got strict height requirements and other things in it. But in order to come up with more creative and innovative land use and designing of this, that a developer can propose modifications to your standards and specifications that don't comply, and if approved, it will control and be binding over it. Now, what we have here in the development agreement, so that we can be very specific, so this isn't like an open-ended license to just do anything but the city's standards. We went through and we created 3 sections in the development agreement. Section 11, Section 12, and Section 13 of the development agreement. Section 11 relates to modifications from the city standards as to Firelight's active adult community. The developer has developed Sun River St. George and has kind of refined that down to a science, and they know what works and what doesn't work for them. And there are some differences in street sizes, in setbacks and things like that. And so Section 11 talks about all of the modifications from the city's normal standards as to the active adult community. Section 12 is modifications from the city's normal standards as to all residential zones. And there's a lot less variations in that Section 12. And then 13 talks about modifications from the city's commercial standards. So those are the 3 things. It's residential, commercial, and kind of a subset of residential, which is the active adult portion. And what I've advocated to conflict counsel is, hey, look, normally development agreements are dealt with, approved by the city council. Conflict counsel said, yeah, but these aspects in this development agreement relate to land use, and the planning commission should have some say in it. And I said, you know what, I'm fine with that. Let's let them look if they have concern about the narrowness of the road, because we have in that development agreement, you can see as one of the exhibits, we have very specific cross sections for the narrower roads. Those are private roads, by the way, maintained by the owners association, but we have narrower roads, and they look different than what our normal city standard road looks like. But we want your feedback on that to see if there's a problem, if there's a reason why it shouldn't be this way. And that's what I think the purpose of this public hearing is as to the development agreement. If we want to get into all of the nuances of the development agreement, other aspects of it, I don't know if that's incredibly relevant and within the purview of the planning commission. But
One question on that very last sentence. It says, however, uses including both permitted and conditional uses specified for each zoning district in this title shall not be modified by the application of this regulation in this article. It's not saying that.
Joey, I was going to point out that same thing. That is, goes to your point of
The nightly rental
using a home as a nightly rental. That is a use issue.
can't
That,
modify. Is that what that means?
no, I can show you the
look at
section.
your nightly rental stuff, but that is the likely outcome is that. But I need to look at your nightly rental.
Yeah, well, but also look closer into 15C 5 requirements and standards, and it talks about uses that you can use a hybrid of uses in the MPDO zone.
You can use a hybrid, but you still can't modify the uses. You still have to go along with the permitted and conditional use. You can modify a hybrid, but not modifying the hybrid.
Yeah. Well, but so we're allowing commercial and we're allowing residential, especially think about this, the whole 700 acres is zoned R120.
Yeah, no, my question is just the permitted and conditional uses. So The way I read this is it says you can't alter any permitted or conditional uses. If I read it right, but that's one of my questions is if I'm reading that right, you can have hybrids of them, but you can't modify them. So that would mean that exactly what Bruce has said is the nightly rental code, if that stands for the whole city and everything, that would outweigh the MPDO. And that's my only question, even when it comes back to that number 10. Or the 10.
Well, I guess my question would be, are nightly rentals, are they allowed in residential zones right now? Okay. So that use isn't changing. You're
No,
saying
the number of them. The only thing that's different in your code, it calls out a different number than our code will. And we've actually made a pathway to allow them to be in an MPDO. In our nightly rental code, right? So
Sure.
that's my only question is that if that is, then every conditional use that's actually listed in as an exception, like the liquor licenses and stuff, I don't know that, oh yeah, I do, in the back of here, then we might have to interpret that more with Bruce, then that might.
Well, that's the permitted use table for commercial planning areas, not for residential planning areas. So that, we need to make that clear, so.
The difference is,
Yeah.
and if it's a permitted use and conditional, then it should be the
If
same.
it's permitted use in the commercial zone, we're doing the same, we've done the same thing, we've just simply said, in our commercial planning areas, this is the list of, and we even went, because there are 8 different commercial planning areas. 9, okay. We created a table that said, in commercial planning area 1, something might be permitted where it's not permitted in another commercial planning area. Even though in a commercial zone, you could have a liquor license, we may say it's only in the town center area, not in those commercial pod areas that are out in the neighborhood.
And just because you say that you could put a liquor license in there, doesn't mean that you don't have to follow all the other codes.
Absolutely. And
That was been a big question.
The development,
Yeah.
well, yeah, the
Still have to
development
follow
agreement
all the
very
other-
clearly says, notwithstanding anything in here, we have to comply with all the city's ordinances as far as permitting and approval processes and those types of things. And state, and liquor, the
It's
licensing
just
of
a-
liquor is a state.
It's just a legend to allow.
So your
you-
P and your C, though, your P, you don't need to come and get a conditional use permit for that. It's just permitted,
But we
right?
might-
But
we
the
might-
C,
We need a conditional use permit. And that's where the city, if it's C, it's conditional. And so we'd have to come get a conditional use permit from the city, and the city may say, we're only gonna allow you to serve alcohol during these hours, and we're gonna do some other things that are requirements that might not be requirements of a state liquor license.
So I didn't cross-reference our code to your guys' permitted. So if there's an issue between the city code and that table, the city code outweighs.
No,
Is that what you're saying?
No, the table does.
Not according to the agreement. So where is there, if there is a,
That's what I'm asking. That's why that sentence, still coming back to that sentence.
So like in the alcohol thing, some of it,
Permitted
there
or
is
conditional use.
limited where it says P, where it's going to be allowed. Personally, I don't care if it's allowed, but I think every alcohol thing should have a conditional.
yeah, you think it should be conditional?
I think so. I think the residents have said that they would like
And,
that.
and if that's a recommendation, that's something definitely the applicant can talk about and say, hey, are we objectionable to having get a conditional use permit in the commercial zones where you have to come to the city, and the city might put some additional regulations that aren't part of the state liquor licensing regulations, because state code, you can't have it within a certain distance of schools and churches.
Right.
The reason,
Things
still
like
the
that.
same reason I come back to that is like, let's say someone wants to put something that serves alcohol that's just outside the MPDO, why would that same license be subject to something different than or permitted or conditional use wise than you guys wouldn't be?
And we probably structured and spaced it and only put it in certain areas and not all areas.
Put it within 100 feet of the school.
Well, that's, you guys need to look at that. That's why you're having your public hearing and you're giving input on that.
That's what I asked the question. Okay, so does anybody else have questions on the development agreement? I think you had a few. You probably have a lot of.
I want an interpretation on this one right here. It is on page 11, water storage site. It reads, means that the area within near the Firelight community to be identified and approved by both developer and city, and subsequently acquired, constructed, and dedicated. That almost leaves to me like maybe we're building that thing for that water storage site.
Keep reading.
We are 2 million gallon water tanks, and the plans are all done for this project. And it's going to be on some of the lowland property.
Flow development agreement, it identified that they were going to dedicate a spot for a water storage tank.
But it also says to be constructed and dedicated.
Keep reading,
Is that-
keep reading, keep reading
If
that.
necessary, the city for the purpose of receiving, holding, storing, and transmitting culinary water.
Let me get to,
That's all I can read, and the raw water majority fire.
hold on. You're not reading the whole section of it. Because it says at developer's expense.
I haven't read that part. Where's that at?
Okay. Yeah, well, that's where,
That would be the
okay,
best
let me get,
Right.
It's not in that whole paragraph.
So
hold on. It is too in that paragraph.
Just seeing that, and it just, the wording.
Okay, give me your page number you're reading from.
I'm in page 11, and I'm looking at the water storage thing. KK.
under definitions.
Oh,
The page numbers don't follow along.
Don't
with
follow.
the thing.
okay,
This
so,
is the development agreement I'm reading this.
I know.
Yeah, but the page numbers don't follow properly.
Let me,
You're still in
I'm
the.
gonna make this thing bigger so I can actually read it even with
Kind
my
of
glasses
facility
on.
system, facility includes system improvement thing.
Yeah, and I get that. That's in the
I get-
definition section. We're defining what the water storage.
It's actually on your page 10.
But if you, I get that, but if you will go down into section,
14.
there's a section about specific rights and responsibilities of the parties.
So you're under
Section-
14A.
Section 14 on page 31.
I just have a quick question that I want to clarify.
This
On
is
the
not
agenda,
relevant.
we're always supposed to be talking, we cannot stray from the agenda. The agenda is for
I know.
the
Well,
development
that's,
agreement is to talk about what pertains to planning commission, which is
but
11,
the planning
12.
commission wants to get into negotiating terms of the development agreement, which is not your
But
purview.
the terms, that's for council.
I get that, but it's a valid question. But Wayne, let me answer your question. 14A, Little Roman I-1, developer shall design, fund, and construct a water
There's
storage site. In quotations, water storage site, the defined term that you were just reading. Developer shall design, fund, and construct. Fully the developer's obligation.
So what did I just read?
You read a definition of what a water storage site is.
There's way more in between 11 and 12 and 13 because all the ERU calculations, which are directly proportional in here, are not in 11,
That's my
12,
question.
13. So there's other sections that pertain
But it-
to us too.
So at the end of that paragraph, though,
Yeah, but we're only supposed to be,
if the water storage site or a portion of the transmission line is located on property other than land within subject property, the city shall procure fee ownership of the water storage site and perpetual easement for the installation, access, and maintenance of the transmission lines. So, yes, the Lowe's donated the property and a right of way, and yes, they're going to, and Firelight will build all of that. I get that. What happens if Firelight needs another water source and another right of way? This is saying that the city will procure that and pay for it. I don't think the city should be paying for any part of that development. That's,
And,
and it says the same thing with power and with
yeah, and
with
again-
roads.
And again, these are all terms.
And this is stuff that came from the Ash Creek agreement that exists already. So we were thinking the agreement
Right.
already runs with the land and the obligations from the city as well.
Right.
Which includes
So-
the procurement of right.
But you've already acknowledged that that was a poor agreement.
I mean, that's really great.
Yeah.
It was an agreement. Let's
Yes.
just say that. It was an agreement.
okay.
But I'm saying that is something that if conflict counsel or the city council tells conflict counsel, we don't want to have any obligation, that needs to be set forth, and the language of that needs to be provided to us, and we need to agree to it. I'm fine with that. That's not necessary, that to me is a term of a negotiated term of a development agreement that is not necessarily land use related, even though it does affect the development of land. It's not, it's the council's purview. So- And that's why I kept
So that was
saying,
gonna be my question to you,
And that's why I said-
is this something we need to be dealing with?
No,
This is something that the
no,
council.
and-
Council needs to deal with that.
and although I appreciate the input from both you two, I say to myself, that's great. And there,
Instructions.
I could probably have
And I
five
might
of
have-
you sit here and pick up 2 or 3 little points that you have a special interest in.
And this might be my fault because my instructions, or, you know, what my intent of this was, is that if you saw something, note it down and make comment on that. But
Give it to
our
your
purview
council.
is 11, 12, and 13. That was my instructions. So if there's
Okay.
any unclarity in the meeting, then that's
No,
gonna
but-
be my fault.
That's a
So
good point. That's a good point. Well, it's well taken.
do we have any more comments on the development agreement? Does anybody else have?
I don't have any more on that, no.
Wayne?
Go ahead.
What are you gonna comment on? I just told you you can't comment on anything.
11,
Wayne, look at section 11.
12, or 13.
It's about 8 or 9 pages long. You're welcome to look at it.
I read it already, but I just,
Do you like
I
the
mean, it's-
fact that,
you're asking me to go through 65 pages of,
11 and 12 and 13 are only like,
well, I'm asking you to
Well,
go
beyond that, your purview is beyond this.
there is a lot of our stuff that is definitely in there.
I've got to highlight.
this is a lot of content.
Okay, so if we don't have any more comments, then we'll open up.
So you,
Does anybody have any more comments from the commission? So we'll open up the public hearing portion of the Firelight Development Agreement. Would anybody,
What are you looking at me for?
you already warned us.
Sit down, Kevin.
Eight 21. Okay, per State Code 1098-532, a development agreement may not limit a municipality authority in the future to enact a land use regulation or take any action allowed under section 1084. Require any municipality to change the zoning designations of an area of land within the municipality in the future or contain, this is all going to mine, we cannot change anything down the road, that this is based on current code, and that the city can't do future code that would impact the agreement, correct? At least that's the way I read some of the verbiage. So again, I'm gonna get on setbacks, on the permitted uses that are called out, if it goes forward as it is, what is currently a permitted use that would be reviewed by the planning commission would no longer be a conditional use that would be reviewed, is now a permitted use for the agreement, which I think well should be reviewed. I'll give this to somebody who's got a number of highlighted areas, but that was, I don't like locking in the city to, if we have changes that we need to do down the road, that we're unable to do that. I think the ordinance, they should be able to build to the ordinance when they submit a plat to the current ordinances. But if it's gonna take 10 years to build this out, and we deem an ordinance needs to be changed, per the way I read this, we can't change that and impact this agreement, correct?
Well, there has to be some vested rights. When the developer puts millions of dollars into development and helps pay for a bypass road and all the horizontal infrastructure, it's gonna take 20 years to build out and to recoup if the city can change the rules halfway through.
I agree, but your agreement allows the state and the county to do it, but restricts the city. So, per the verbiage in your agreement. But I just don't think you should lock the city that tight. And
You understand the
I
preemption clause of the Constitution,
I
right?
understand the agreement and why it's.
We don't have an agreement with City of Utah or the US government.
I understand that.
Okay.
And there's a reason the state of Utah probably would not agree to it. But all I'm saying is that's locking the city a little tight for something we can't foresee down the road, but may have to be done. So I've got several comments in it that I'll submit, but I just don't care for that part of it. And I understand why we're doing the hearing now is the only way you can make it so you don't have to comply with current city ordinances is by doing a public hearing on it and having it go through this review. If it did not, then you would have to the city ordinances. I just think If you need to do something different than city ordinance, come in, we have a process to do a variance. And I've been told before that they would have not had a problem doing that. So I don't think you take that away.
The MPDO approval process is kind of the equivalent of a great big variance request. And that's what we've been doing.
Remember, if we miss something, that I missed. So
Say that again?
I don't draft this, if you recall. And if we miss something, that's on me, but not me.
I don't know if I get what you mean by that. So it's not, you're saying, all I'm saying is that the process of approving an NPDO rezone from the conceptual approval process to the preliminary to the final, that whole thing is the equivalent of basically coming and asking for some variances. And when it's approved and it's locked into a development agreement that gets recorded against the land, and it's you amend your official zoning map to show NPDO, and you've got the actual plan itself, it's been approved, the written narrative with all the exhibits and everything, that locks it, and that is the variance, essentially. And all I'm trying to say is the NPDO is the equivalent of a great big variance.
I agree on this one.
Well, let's move with the public, we're still in the public hearing, so let's not have the debate. We can, if anybody else has any more comments for the public hearing? No? Okay, we'll look for a motion to close the public hearing.
I make a motion that we close the public hearing on the final Firelight Development Agreement.
We suspend it, or do you want to?
No, this one's good.
Oh, this one's good.
We're just, yeah. We have a motion, looking for a second? We have a motion and a second, we'll vote.
Aye.
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 Okay, does any of the commissioners have any more comments on the development agreement? Before we give the blessing to the city council to let them have their fun.
Explain to me what's wrong with it. What's the criteria, what's wrong with it right now?
The development agreement?
What
What
is it not?
What is our responsibility?
What is it
Our
not?
What's the
responsibility,
criteria that we,
there's no criteria. This is kind of a special request that we take a look at the zoning, the land use applications. But that's why they were talking about 11, 12, and 13. And as Dan said, this rear and the side setbacks and the rear and the front and the side, no wall, like all these variances they're asking for in these sections are different than our code. They're asking for variances in them. So what they're asking for is us to tell the city council, we're okay with these variances. We're okay with them using their land in that area, right?
Yeah.
So in them specific things, that's what it is. So does anybody have any more comments on it? I mean, I've been through that a whole bunch of times, and I mean, when you see the plans down the road and how they actually have to cluster and the way they are going to cluster, there's no other way to use some of it unless you have some of these. And every other city has another variance and another mechanism that allows a developer to do this. Our code only allows someone to go down to R112, right? So if any developer wants to do anything smaller than an R112, then they got to do an MPDO. You got to have 500 acres. You got to have 500 acres. So that's the real thing is when we're kind of making a motion that we recommend either that the 11 through 13 is acceptable for the land use, and then the city council gets to tear this whole document apart.
And if you guys want to make the recommendation that anything that's listed as conditional uses in the commercial zone, that we update our table to make them not permitted but conditional.
Under conditional.
That's a recommendation. That's part of your recommendation. You can do that, and we'll talk about that as the development group. I don't know that would necessarily be an issue. It's just a second layer of approval. You got to get conditional use permit from the city, and then you may have to get some sort of licensing from another entity.
I like that because then there's not a question. Like down the road, someone's like, "Well, you read the code," then they don't. go and see the MPDO, they don't
Say,
realize.
well, how come they do it?
Why are they building that dance hall when,
You know, so it
without
might make-
permission?
might make the city's job a lot easier in 5 years, but go ahead.
How about we do permitted alcohol uses in the town center only, conditional everywhere else?
Why would you not just do a conditional all the way around? I mean, I can't imagine not.
The town center is going to be a tourist center. It's going to have lots of hotels, restaurants, and we think that's a fundamental, just the tourist-based area. We think that's something that's going to be needed.
And there's not gonna be a lot of residential around, it's all. gonna
Right,
be-
but I don't know why you would want not, why would you be nervous bringing that in front of the planning commission or the city council? Because I personally don't have a problem with that.
It's,
Just another layer.
I think,
I think it's just.
that's a great question. And I think if you look at about how that development will work, likely, it's gonna have to be the end user, the establishment, the restaurant establishment owner who's gonna have to come and get the conditional use permit, not us. And we don't want to have to make it any harder for them in that one area to come from a marketing standpoint, or for, the ability to make it more desirable, because there are plenty of certain areas in other cities where having a restaurant with a liquor license is a permitted use, it's not conditional.
That's the sort of thing we envision for that area.
Check to see if it's anywhere in
That's what I was saying, I never had time to cross-reference them.
But I think that, yeah, so.
Because if it's already a permitted use, we can't, it's already permitted use, it's the same as the same.
You are mixing residential and commercial.
Yeah, but not in the town center.
Town center, it may have some.
There might be some residential in there, but it's likely going to be above commercial.
Yes. I'm just saying, we're talking as if it's purely commercial, and it's not. It's a mix of residential and commercial. So you do have families touring here. Right.
It's,
I think what tourism is anywhere in the States.
I'm just pointing out.
Let's keep it to applicant. Dan? Dan, the public hearing comment's over, so I don't want to make an argument here, but we'll try to keep it to
So,
the commission and.
so saying that they need to come for a conditional use permit, we're not saying it can't happen, or that even the likelihood that it wouldn't happen. It's just let this, I mean, because again, you start seeing residents out there, well, wait a minute, I didn't see any liquor, something going through the city. Why is this? And I get, there is significant leeway given to this development because it's such a large development. But I also think that certain things should just come back through the council or the commission.
Is that the motion?
That it would, I would make that motion, yes.
What was
We
that?
forward this F9 to the city council, recommending approval with the condition of changing and so that the liquor licenses,
The permitted and conditional
permitted
uses
uses,
follow our city code.
thank you. And then also that we strongly urge the city council to go through the other things, and we can't do that, but
Take the other 29 chapters.
Maybe look at chapter 3. I'm just thinking that they're already a permitted use.
I'm looking in the, are you talking in the commercial?
I'm looking at chapter 3 of our code, alcohol beverages, talks about
The-
definitions, types of licenses required applications.
Well, the way you made the recommendation just makes it so that it is the
Compliance with our
same.
ordinance, so whatever we
Yeah.
determine.
we're not saying it's not permitted, it's just come get a conditional use
I'm
permit.
just saying for Scott, because he said we're going
Yeah.
over permitted to conditional, and I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it's already in here. As a,
I was requesting permitted in the town center.
but it's permitted all, it's permitted. the way you have it.
And
Is what I'm saying.
I think commercial, purely commercial, which this is not.
It is.
This is a mixed zone. The one he's talking about, there's chances change.
But in the MPDO, it shows it's,
That we said was going conditional and it's already permitted.
Okay.
okay. So that's my motion.
Okay, that's the motion. The
Did you get
motion,
that?
can you repeat it?
Thank
You
you.
got it? You want to repeat it so that,
So I would I make a motion that we recommend that we recommend approval to the city council for the Firelight Development Agreement with the conditions of the permitted conditional uses.
Remain the same as the city code.
Yes,
Have a motion?
that would be my motion.
Motion and a second. Vote.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. That continues or finishes that item. So that takes us, we're done with the business items. We'll go down to the discussion items. And on the discussion on the possible future resort zone overlay, I think Darren's,
Joey, sorry to interrupt, but just so that I'm not burdening the town with my time and cost, am I okay to drop off
you
now?
betcha. We appreciate your time.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Discussion on the possible future resort zone overlay. I think, Darren, I think you guys were looking at that. I'm sure you guys didn't get time to dive into that resort zone overlay. And also Sean was,
So I have just a kind of a, maybe a thought about you guys. With the, now that I need to review every conditional use permit that's ever been established in the city.
Thank him.
Everybody knows every month. Plus-
Wayne will help you.
Plus, the public works guy makes sure that, the sewer lines, there's all things we got going on. Is one of the reasons I didn't get to the user application. I'm looking at this here, and now we're asking for like code, basically, code.
I think like, I think the last one, you were just going to review it and see if you thought it was anything in line or if we should start working on it.
I could, in my professional experience, I don't have the qualifications to see that's right. Like, you have a closer group, you know, that you know, something like that. Yeah, I think the extra zone, I probably spend 40 hours on it right now, over that. And I met with my tools on cities and the funding structure like that, and all of it is that enough. Is kind of give you guys a heads up of what, hey, this is what, Hurricane City is using, because it seems like it was one of the better, transportation zones. It's all very similar. But I don't know if you want to talk about item 2 there first, or if you want to go to item 1, I would suggest.
You could just move on and come back to it next time because Sean was leading that discussion. We didn't have anything, he didn't change anything, I know that, but
Yeah,
it's a big one.
straight out of,
he said he was going to actually draft a document that might work for the city for the resort zone overlay. Yeah. I'm just kidding.
I'll get to that one too.
So, I'm not complaining. It's just the fact of being able to do all those things. So, I definitely prioritize it. But I would like to get 2 minutes to get for what we have there. I don't think we have that before. The discussion on that agricultural just to give you guys, this is a very preliminary look at, these are just my lines of this. The biggest thing here, that I see in all of the reasoning behind the agricultural zone overlay is not because people have to keep cows, not because they have farming, really, the biggest deal is to keep city municipalities from condemning their property for a road or a power line. You still do that, even though it's in this ordinance, this overlay zone. They have an exhaustive standard. I think we also probably ought to include a little bit more definition for what they have here. On this town, but I feel about one of the planning commissioners, the zoning administrators at Kirk, and he's talking about butchering cows and animals and that. He said it was because we have concern that we butcher cows, or we have to do that, whatever. He said, well, how do we butcher the cow? Because really that's a, that's really, it's really the farming as well. As to you that they come out and shoot cows, there's the number one problem, because you will put overlay protection zone, this gets registered with the state as well. And then there's also a committee that oversees the governance of the county. And I think it's on page 2 there, there's a advisory board. This is, who this advisory board is it's that county agricultural. And I've got the information, I've got to contact afterwards, chairman of that. So when that gets reported, and it's your property, you are now required by the state, you can't be shooting cows in your field. There's things, there's industries that want that too. He talks about, it also talks about your agricultural uses of your land. So if you're watering from the neighbor's lawn, and it's watering your house, or using your property, there's issues there because you're supposed to, your boundaries, and I don't know if it was, finding out these things out, I'm not sure that we know this. So if you get a bird, the agricultural users, they can't water at certain times, and they can't, and then the state will back that up. You can't water them, you can't spray. Basically, your farming operations have to happen inside the boundaries of your property. And if you go outside of that, let's straight more field outside of that. And I think it's in city code anyway, but you can't just try to fire on the city limits. It's only another way to get a cow and I haven't seen no country for the old. But anyway,
Is this the
so
farm board or the
the
planning?
big thing is, I guess, this was given charge by the city council to myself, as well as I believe the
I had it.
all that happened, and then maybe that. But so if you look down through there, this advisory board, we got to change a few references to the code. But I'd like you guys to look through this and read through it. Sounds like the planner's already done that. And then your redline, get that back to me so that I can change that and go through and discuss that kind of like what we've done in the past. So you guys are very first time seeing it.
So would this have to go through a advisory board, or can you change that to
It
be?
does. It has to go through an advisory board. And
Wow.
So there's an application made, it goes through the city council, or goes through the planning commission, so through the advisory board, and you give them so much time, if they don't respond within a certain time, then they can move forward in the process, and they go to the city council.
But to do this, you are subject to the advisory board. Yeah.
So, well, the advisory board can say, yes, we do their application, then again, we treated the application, I know the whole application. Right. Word for word, no chance of this at all.
Right.
I think some of our applications have been built and designed based on what's happened in the city of Fairfield. And I appreciate a lot of land use applications. We love it that way. And so when we talk about the difference between the road names, there's nothing about that in the checklist in the plan.
So the property owners who own the lot, you're saying
Yeah,
they'll automatically.
yeah, so it does go automatically to everything. So if you have to own 5 acres or more, it has to be green belt.
So when the property owner applied, they would know that they couldn't shoot their cow, and they would know,
They should.
should know that, okay. But it would still protect them with some of the other stuff.
Yeah, it would protect them against condemnation of the property. If the city has, every other avenue. That's a lot of them. They also, expect to do subdivision building around and it also, there's a clause in there that requires new subdivisions coming in to report on their plan. Which lots, so the big clause is not, it says, hey, your house is being built next to, you're buying a lot that's being built right next to the ag use zone. And, those types of things. So essentially, I think it's a good thing, but the landowners have to come in and apply for this, so there'll be an application fee, there'll be a process, and we'll go forward that way. It's not just something you bring to the city.
So if a landowner had, whatever acreage and they wanted to put that in there and then later wanted to develop that land, what process would be, and go through basically the same process, just having it removed? But it's not stuck in there.
No, if it would have 10 years, the applicant doesn't come back and renew it, it's automatically used for additional.
So the assignment is for each of the commissioners to redline or make their changes. They'll email you the copy, and then we'll have a more formal document next meeting.
So, yeah, you got my comments on there.
Yeah. I liked it a little bit, but I just really thought it was over-regulating the farm.
It does.
You gotta do a lot of jumps and
I wonder if the driving purposes behind what the council's asked Darren, you to look at, the planning commission to look at, is to create better scenarios of protection so that when residential merges with agricultural, there's not issues and that agricultural uses can continue. Maybe we ought to look at like some supplemental regulations for subdivisions that like require walls, that require that they can't construct, maybe it's a deeper setback between it and agricultural, property lines with agricultural zoned property. Or some proration of that, so it gets because lots could be shallow and stuff like that. But some things that we just it's a supplemental requirement for subdivisions to do. If you're going to build right next to a big agricultural area, then you need to put a block wall up there and things like that. And then that way you're not necessarily regulating the farmer. You're making the developer maybe have a little additional expense, but it's so that down the road, everyone can live happily as neighbors.
And they'd even require them to put greenbelt on their plats.
No, and I think plat notations to an extent, but zoning can change too also. But I think at least a plat note saying that these lots are adjacent to currently zoned agricultural zones, and that the use of that property could create adverse smells and sounds and stuff like that. Just like it's very common when I review plats for other municipalities that are next to a golf course, there's almost always a errant golf ball type plat note in there that people, so that you're deemed to be on constructive notice. You buy a lot in that platted subdivision, right on the plat itself says that you're on notice that there could be errant and stray golf balls in your backyard. It could do property damage, and that the city, by approving it, has no liability or stuff like that.
Same thing for airports. It's talking about the nuisances for each subdivision, and it has an actual statement that we have.
Yeah, but you could play.
So it talks about it. You are located within 300 feet of the boundary of the agricultural, so people know that they're buying that house.
But instead of making that a zone that the farmer applies for, just make those requirements for
subdivisions
Right.
in your
that are
supplemental
adjacent.
regulations for under chapter 19 of the subdivision
They do
ordinance.
the same thing with the mining process.
Yeah, yeah.
Same thing, it's kind of governed by a state.
Just volunteer to write more code?
But they also.
Maybe I did.
Create a buffer zone because, agricultural.
Dan just offered to draft that.
Dan drafted that.
Well, doesn't our code in zoning, doesn't it require a buffer
Free to draft that.
transitioning anyway? You know, you can't put, you know, industrial right next to residential. You've got to
Yeah,
have.
so the thing is interstate route too, and all the new homes up on the ridge, they've got to create a buffer zone, a buffer area. So like, they have to do that.
That's just an option besides going with a whole new kind of zone that you have to opt into, opt out of, and when you're in it, you. But I do agree that maybe there is some protections in that concept behind some additional protections against the municipality condemning, unless it's, but other than that, I don't know if there's a ton of protection why a farmer would want to go out and apply to be part of it.
I would think the city should be using every other means before they do eminent domain anyway.
We gotta adopt that as a
Yep.
resolution.
Yeah.
City that we don't condemn unless we absolutely have to.
Okay, so we have our assignment for that. Is there any other discussion on it for tonight?
No.
I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Do we really want to, if we're gonna just
Well,
go a
let's get
different
the
route?
let's look at it and get our comments to Darren. And
Okay.
then Darren can see if everybody says this is done, then.
Okay,
And it could incorporate some of those comments into other
Yeah.
areas.
Yeah. So I'd look for a motion.
I'll make
to
a motion that we adjourn.
a second.
adjourn. Second.
Aye.
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 The planning commission meeting is adjourned at 8:46.
Crap, now I gotta go home and put it.
Oh, my long meeting.
Love you, dear.
Oh, my God.
Send me a message. You were in so much trouble.
Just the final version.